great pleasure to welcome David Plink, the CEO of Top Employers, to What's Next. Firstly, David, apologies for the weather. I know you've just arrived in Johannesburg from the Netherlands, if I'm not mistaken. So I'm sure that you're quite used to this rainy weather, but welcome nonetheless. I apologize, there's no sunshine. How are you doing?
I'm doing very well, thank you. Indeed, the rain is very familiar. It's just like in the Netherlands where I come from, but I know also that in South Africa, a little bit of rain every now and again can't hurt. So I'm happy for nature and happy for the water reservoirs being filled. So we take the good out of
Indeed,
this.
it's a blessing. It's indeed a blessing. Well, listen, it's great to have you with us. Now, I believe that tomorrow will be Top Employers Annual Certification Celebrations in Africa. It's quite a long word, and this is why you're here. So tell us more about this celebration. What exactly are we celebrating, and more importantly, why are we celebrating this occasion? And I believe that the theme for this year is the pursuit of excellence, which is a great energy-driven theme. So do you want to share your thoughts on this and how this fits into HR and tell us a little bit more about this celebration?
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, annually we acknowledge those employers that put the best conditions in place for their people, and that's going to be happening tomorrow in Johannesburg, at the Kalami racetrack, where we will be hosting um, hundreds of HR professionals from across South Africa and the African continent to applaud their achievements in HR, and mostly focused on what they offered their people to develop. So we'll have an executive program in the afternoon where we will be diving a little bit deeper into the insights. And in the evening, we'll have a celebratory program, which really puts the spotlight on those companies that have performed to the best of their abilities. And the theme, as you mentioned, is the pursuit of excellence. And I'm an avid sports fan, so I love watching sports, performing sports. And what we see is that if you look at the best performing sports teams, they're really focused on marginal gains, improving little bits and pieces across the whole domain, from training to food to sleep to psychological well-being. Everything is being taken care of to perform at the best of the abilities of these athletes. Now we see the same thing in HR. We see that the HR teams that are able to perform at that level, that are able to deserve that statutory certification, they're doing the same thing. So across the whole range of HR topics, they are applying those marginal gains to be better every day. So that is the connection with sports. And yeah, it just happens to be personal passion of mine. So that makes me happy.
Oh, that's fantastic. Well, listen, I like it. And it certainly, when you mentioned sport and you mentioned the competitive landscape of sport, I couldn't agree with you more. I think it relates well to the HR environment and the work environment. And let's be honest, there have been so many changes in the HR environment into how businesses work. COVID changed many things, and even artificial intelligence is changing many things. And in today's competitive landscape, how does Top Employers institute power? How does Top Employers empower at least companies to really enhance their HR strategies through data insights? I mentioned AI and data because this is the world that we're living in. It's a data-driven world, but they need to be, of course, specific to HR. And what impact does this have on organizational performance, for example?
Yeah, what I just mentioned is what we're going to be celebrating tomorrow is the certification part. So really focused on achieving that pinnacle of HR excellence. But what is beyond that, and that is the second pillar that we rest on as a company, are the assessments and the benchmarks that we provide to our clients. So we really help them to navigate this landscape. They, upon completing the process, um, both for the non-certified as well as for the certified companies, have access to our portal where they can benchmark themselves on all these HR topics, from performance management to onboarding to learning and development, leadership development, remuneration, all of those topics. We benchmark them on, and they get access to 2,500 top employers around the world that have performed at the equal level, and they can compare how they've done, and they can get inspired from that. Besides that, we also have a vast library of best practices also accessible via our portal, where companies can learn from each other and say, okay, this is the problem they were facing. this is the solution, and this is what actually came out of that. So again, really focus on helping these companies be inspired by other top employers, and thereby improving their own policy. So we have assessment, benchmarking, research and insights, reports, benchmarks, all available for our top employer clients.
Oh, that's fantastic. You know, it's always great to see networking and learning from each other and seeing what's best practice out there. I mean, it's really important in benchmarking yourselves against others. And the fact that you can network and share is wonderful. Now, with that being said, and you know, with top employers being a leading HR insights company, how do you see the future of connected HR ecosystems evolving? And you know, from that evolution, what opportunities does this present for organizations that are aiming to achieve the excellence you talk about? And also, how does this now feed the goal of remaining ahead of the curve in the playing field for attracting and retaining top talent? Because we know that attracting and retaining top talent is probably one of the most challenging parts of running a big organization today, and even a small to medium-sized organization.
Yeah, no, that's certainly a challenge. And what we do, the way I look at these connected HR ecosystems, it happens at different levels. So, um, if a company participates in our program, they have to supply information across a whole range of domains, and not always by the same people in the organization. You have specialists that focus on certain areas, and they get connected internally. So the first step is really in the process to make sure that all the right professionals are involved in going through the full certification and audit methodology. Now, also, we see that within larger companies, often they participate in multiple countries, which also connects these HR professionals across borders, and they can learn from each other from the practices that are applied in some countries, but maybe not in all. And then finally, a top layer of that is the top employers community, which is in fact a large HR ecosystem. And what I always find so fascinating is that if you look at direct competitors, they're also always very exclusive about their IP and their content and their own craft. So it's very secretive. So if you bought PepsiCo against Coca Cola, they will not share very openly. But within the HR community and within the top employers community, we see much more of a tendency to openly share. So last week we had an event in Madrid where we had all global and enterprise certified companies together in an afternoon exchange of best practices. And right side by side, there were two competitors, Other Consultancy Services and Infosys, who operate at a global scale in exactly the same market. And they're sitting there next to each other, both sharing their best practice in HR without holding back. So I think the top employers community unlocks that, yeah, that safety and transparency in sharing. So I think that benefits all of these top employers in terms of, yeah, the attraction, retention, all the policies and practices they put in place for their people. So all at different levels, the HR ecosystem gets supported by what we do.
Okay, that's very, very interesting. Could you tell us a little bit more about what the Top Employers Institute does? How is it all involved and where do they fit in?
Yeah, so what we do is we aim to guide and empower employers on their journey to be a top employer. And what that means is that we have tools in place that help companies to make the most of make sense of this, yeah, quite dynamic world we live in right now. So we do that on one hand through the certification, the assessment, the benchmark that we offer. That's kind of the bread and butter of what we exist of in the past. So that's our basis. And then what you see is that we're more and more also developing enablement and advisory tools. So we're helping companies to dive deeper into both their own results, in showing them examples from other top employers, but also adding new services like HR Edge Neuro Inclusion, where we help them to navigate the domain of how to attract and retain neurodivergent talent, because many people qualify that identify themselves as being neurodivergent, being autistic, ADHD, dyslexic, dyscalculia, all of these. And they not always get the same opportunity. Whereas we see that both from an inclusion perspective, but also from the perspective of bringing out the best talents of people, that's vital to businesses because most ideas come not from neurotypical people, but come from neurodivergent people. So that's the enablement and advisory part. And then thirdly, what we focus on is research and insight. So we have a very strong research team that looks at the market continuously, assesses it, does specific surveys to look at trends in the marketplace, like how does AI in HR evolve? How do we see various generations at work? So many elements that help top employers navigate these dynamic times in HR and in the the global dynamics anyway.
Yeah. No, listen, that's David. That's absolutely fascinating. I'm really enjoying this conversation because it's something I'm very passionate about. And when you look at company culture, and you just think, I mean, this is at the core of every organization. You need to get your HR function right. If you don't, it affects all sorts of parts of your organization. And we know how organizations today are modernizing and are changing, and there's shifts happening with, automation and AI, et cetera, et cetera. It's impacting everyone. And clearly, Top Employers is an authority in the HR function. So, based on your research that you guys are doing and ongoing research, you've really got your finger on the pulse in terms of what the HR trends are out there. What are the biggest HR trends that you are seeing up to now and that we can expect to see in 2025? I mean, what trends are you seeing so far in 2025 and where are we going?
Yeah, good question. We have kind of firsthand knowledge of what is happening in the HR uh, area in the HR domain. And what we see is a number of trends. So, first of all, companies are really focused on creating sustainable workforces. So, with the current demographic developments, we see that the influx of younger workers is in some cases pretty difficult. So, if you think about Korea or Japan, there the demographics are such that the population there is hugely aging. So we see that has impact on your ability to attract people to work for you. So that and coupled with the various expectations from generations as work, Gen Z, Gen X, the millennials, and the baby boomers all together in one big melting pot. That doesn't always go well. So companies are really focused on making the most of that and how to navigate the different expectations that each generation has. So that's the first one. So really focus on sustainable workplaces. And secondly, we also see a different sense of belonging. So we call that the new belonging. So where in the past, people would work for organizations for decades and sometimes even their lifetime, we see much more fluid relationships. And we need to acknowledge that. It's not something we can say, oh, that's just that because Gen Z employees are not loyal. It's a fact of life. So we need to see how we can actually make sure that we stay connected with people that leave, that provide alumni networks, because we see the opportunity to rehire people. They work for you for a couple of years, they move to another employer, and then they can come back with new skills, new experiences. So I think that's something to navigate as well. So that new belonging is a really important one to essentially make sure that we take new dynamics as a given rather than complain and lament about it. Thirdly, we
Okay.
see a shift in the types of jobs. Yeah, go ahead if you want to interrupt me.
No, no, no. I was about to ask you. Go ahead, and I'll ask you after this third shift you're talking about.
Yeah, the third shifts that we see. So typically, we look at the workplace consisting of people in blue collar job and white collar jobs. And now we're appropriately dressed together today as the white collar employees. But we see a new trend there as well, and that's called new collar jobs. So highly technical roles that require more skills than education necessarily. So we see if you currently work in an ambulance, that's a very technical job that would in the past maybe considered as a blue collar job, but because it's a hands-on role, but it's working with so much technology that you're seeing that this is becoming a new category. And this new category requires specific skills. And we also see that companies are actually foregoing the regular university degree as a condition to work for a company, but really looking more at skills and looking more at what a person can bring, and then educate them on the job. That's a new category. A fourth one, I mentioned already, neuro inclusion is becoming very important. And to underline that, I just read about research in the UK where managers at IT firms were asked what percentage of their workforce identifies as a neurodivergent, and the managers thought about 5%. And then they asked the same employees, the employees at the same companies, and 50% of the employees identified as neurodivergent. So you see, there's a big gap over there. And that's something that top employers are trying to bridge by having specific onboarding and recruitment, talent acquisition programs to look at the workplace, to look at work from home policies, to tap into the potential of neurodivergent workers. And then finally, you mentioned as well, another trend that we're seeing is really focused on AI, and coupling it with leadership. So we've had a lot of focus over the past 2 years on how to replace certain jobs with HR. With AI, I don't necessarily believe in that. I think it's people working with AI, but moreover, you also see that leaders are forced or asked to augment their skills with AI. So decision-making processes can be augmented with AI. And that's just an interesting one in the sense that leaders typically think of themselves as, I wouldn't say almighty, but definitely at a pretty high esteem of themselves. But they could also be improved by AI tools and thereby improve their efficiency as a leader. So those 5 trends are visible at the top employers, and we see that they're shaping the workplaces of tomorrow.
Wow, that's really, really fascinating. So what I wanted to ask you, is there really a massive difference? I mean, you've been following these trends for many years between, we all categorize and label different generations. You got Gen Zs, you got millennials like myself, you got baby boomers, etc. And I do sometimes feel that, millennials, that we are sometimes unfairly labeled. So is there a massive difference between the Gen Zs and millennials and boomers and baby boomers, etc.? Or is it much of a muchness? Is it just that we are starting to label things to try and differentiate it?
I definitely think there are differences between generations because we grow up in different times. So if you look at millennials having grown up and entering the workplace just after, for instance, the terrorist attacks in the US on 9/11, that creates a different sense of safety, and it impacted the world economy immediately. So you have these events that typically shape a generation. Having said that, what I think is pretty interesting, if you look at it a little bit from a bigger distance, when my parents were growing up, so my mom was growing up in the 60s, and then they were just lazy and just listening to the wrong music, and they were doing all kinds of things that were seen by older generations as lazy and not able to be fitting in the workplace. And in the 70s, you had the hippies, and the millennials are seen as too slow. My generation was called the French fry generation in the Netherlands. That is. So growing up in the 80s and 90s, we were not as diligent and not as focused and not as committed. So we were called the French fry generation. I don't know why exactly that name, but that was a name that was passed on that. So what I do think is that be it Gen Z, Gen Y, Gen X, every generation entering the workplace is seen as unfit to work initially. But the thing is, also Gen Z employees will most likely have a mortgage in a couple of years, will most likely have a family, and will also mold into the workplace in that sense. So I think we have to, avoid labeling things too much. It's just, hey, they're young people
Yeah,
coming into the
exactly.
workplace. They need to learn the ropes. They need to learn what it's like to work in an organization. And yeah, they have different expectations. And if you look at those expectations, I think you and I would have loved those when we entered the workplace as well. So they're not asking weird things. They're just more vocal about it.
Okay, fair enough. Good point. I like the way you've you've explained it, and I like your the generation that you come from. The what did you call them? The French fry
Yeah, the French
generation.
fries. Yeah.
patat frites and
Exactly.
my favorite French fries from the Netherlands are patat oorlog, which are
Oh,
absolutely
that's a good one.
delicious. Yeah, yeah.
It's my
So
favorite too.
in you,
Without onions. I
yeah,
like the one just with peanut sauce and mayonnaise.
that's it. Just the peanut sauce is good. I don't like the onions either. Now, in your experiences, um, what in your experience are the key things that set businesses with excellent HR practices apart from those who lag behind? Because again, if you don't keep ahead with HR practices, it's going to impact your business growth, I believe.
Absolutely. So you need to continuously develop and you need to continuously adapt to changing environments. But I also think, and that's something that I've been with the Lavendar's Institute for almost 17 years now. And what I've seen is that it's really about consistency. So if you look at, for instance, the US right now with a different climate under new leadership, with DEI completely being put in the corner of wokeness and wrong, basically. What I see is that the employers that are certified within our program apply consistency. They don't just change course immediately when the political direction or the geopolitical or the macroeconomic circumstances change. They stay the course, and I think that's an important dynamic. They're focused on their people. They're focused on consistency, both on a time scale, but also on a global scale. So being able to apply the same principles and policies where possible across the globe. So really consistency in people practice, that's what sets them apart.
So, connected HR systems are really critical in the modern workplace. And if there's one thing that I dislike in the world is lots of paperwork, and I like the processes to be streamlined. And of course, onboarding in an organization and filling out dozens of forms, I find is so excruciatingly painful. Could you explain what a connected HR system is and how it benefits a business?
Yeah, I think it's a good question because what we've seen over the past years with automation taking hold so much in the HR domain as well is that the companies that are able to create a more seamless and connected HR system are getting ahead. And that, in my opinion, means a system that connects all life stages and steps within the employee experience and the employee journey. So it starts with the recruitment process, with the onboarding process, with performance management, learning and development, just filing for leave days, sick days, the overview of your benefits. So having that all in one system is truly beneficial. That's what our employees expect from us. They don't want to log into various systems. They don't want to fill out many forms. So I think that consistency and seamless experience is what we expect as consumers, but also as employees. And we should treat our employees in that sense as a consumer too. So lots of gains still for many organizations, but I think across the top employers community, we see really good best practices, and they're working with obviously the bigger tools from UKG and from Workday, from SAP. All of those are visible to give employees access to all the information they need at the moment.
Well, that's interesting. But at the same time, many businesses may be resistant to making these kind of changes to existing HR systems. They'll probably say, well, it's working up to now. We don't have any issues. Everything's pretty stable. And we also don't want to add an additional budget allocation to upgrade or whatever the case may be. What should motivate these businesses to make these changes and embrace a connected HR ecosystem? What should be the trigger point for these organizations to say, hey, we need this? It's going to make a difference to our organization.
Yeah, it's a good question. It is an investment. It's an investment in time, in resources from the organization. Obviously, also a financial investment. And there's lots of switching costs involved. So you want to do that well. So it's certainly a big step. But the thing is, um, companies need to create these circumstances to kind of weed out the daily nuisances, the daily annoyances that employees encounter. So people stay in companies that have a good culture, that have leadership and the direct manager that actually resonates with them and then gives them opportunities. But the thing is, all these things can be very good, but if somebody runs into complicated bureaucratic systems every day, it will take the life out of them. And yeah, so you risk staff turnover if you haven't got these hygiene factors covered. So I think in the end, people stay for culture, for meaningful and purposeful work, and for managers that bring out the best in them and camaraderie amongst their colleagues, all of those. But you'd be amazed to see how many people just get really annoyed and disengaged when the day-to-day basics don't work. So I would definitely advocate for investing in that.
Okay. We've mentioned AI quite a bit in this conversation, and it's a huge topic for the way we do business in our day-to-day lives, how businesses are using AI to expand and how they're running their businesses. And I'm sure that, the HR world is no stranger to AI. It's, I'm sure, having a tremendous impact in this world. And obviously, AI being such a huge topic in the business sector, my question to you is, what role can AI play in improving the HR function and even enabling a connected HR ecosystem?
Yeah, I think within the HR systems, it can definitely help employees to navigate quickly through it. So, be it through a chatbot, be it through other tools, it can help reduce the complexity around mundane tasks. So, I think in the interface between employees and their systems, it can play a big role, and it does for many companies. Beyond that, I think within HR, we need to benefit from what AI has to offer. So, efficiencies in creating job specs, in creating competencies, in creating all kinds of um, um, deliverables that sometimes can be delivered much faster through AI. But we also need to take into account the risks. So you need to train systems properly because, particularly if you apply AI in recruiting, in resume selection, and all that, you have to be careful not to fall victim to some of the biases in there. So, and again, that's not say you shouldn't try it and shouldn't apply it because the fun thing, it is artificial intelligence and it can learn. So if you give the right information, version 2 and version 3 are going to be much better than version 1. So I think there's a wealth to discover still. But because we're working with people and we're working for people, we need to apply it with diligence.
David, anybody that's watching this, a business, small business, a large organization, and they want to take the next step towards embracing this world that we're living in, this connected HR ecosystem, that, the one cannot argue whatever we've discussed in today's interview, that it benefits an organization. It adds more agility, it streamlines processes, it helps the employee and the employer, and really it's just a no-brainer. How does one get in touch with the Top Employers Institute, and how does Top Employers Institute help in this regard? What can you do for my organization?
Yeah, first of all, to get in touch is the easy thing. To go to our website, and just fill out a contact form. Then we'll be in touch within days to make sure that you get the audience gets a better idea of what it what it'd be like to be certified as a top employer and get access to all these research and insights, and also whether they're ready for it. So I think that's a good conversation to have. Above all, I think be it in humans or in organizations and in HR teams, um, a growth mindset, learning every day, becoming better every day is the basis on which everything is based. So I hope that by listening to this conversation, people are inspired to look at best practice with others and forego the not invented here syndrome because we are really focused on sharing what the best companies are applying and benefiting from that. So you really need an open mind as to the good stuff that is happening outside your organization as well.
Yeah, and I know it's difficult. I would ask you a tough question in the ending. I mean, once you've got these processes in place, these HR processes, they must be quantifiable from a financial impact on how the organization runs. Because I would imagine that once you've got that process running a lot smoother, it makes everybody happy along that ecosystem, and there must be a positive impact, whether it's be quantifiable financially or the general well-being or the I don't know, how do you measure the general happiness within an organization? Because once you have all these systems in place, they surely are quantifiable to say it's working, people are happy, we're seeing the results.
Yeah, no, absolutely. We see that in our clients that they have more spontaneous applications. They have better scores on their retention, on their employee engagement. So those are things that we typically see across top employers. But one of the things that is often overlooked is how it also impacts the overall health of the organization. And one simple metric of that, you get a proxy because it's not all encompassing, but it's the stock price of companies that are certified versus the stock price of companies that are not listed. And we see that top employers typically outperform their peers by factor two. So that says a lot. I have to say there as well, there's a bit of a chicken and an egg because companies that are more successful have more abilities to invest in their people and also invest in programs like ours. But there's a key difference that's undeniable. So we see that these companies typically perform better from a business point of view as well. And I can't
Absolutely
say it is
fascinating.
because they're a top employer, because it's because of a lot of factors, but it certainly plays a role.
No, this is fascinating. David, I've really enjoyed our conversation. Thank you very, very much for joining us. Enjoy the rest of your stay in
Thank you
Johannesburg.
so much.
David Plink is the CEO of Top Employers, and just Google him and the Top Employers Institute and find out how they can help your organization really thrive and take their HR systems to a next level and really add that. I don't know, the modernization of that HR ecosystem, which is critical in all sorts of benefits and spheres of HR that we've discussed in this particular interview. David, thank you very much.
My pleasure. Thank you so much for the invitation.